This is the intro to Esther for our Bible study on Esther. I didn't get it recorded for the session that we did for our first chapter. So I want to read this out of the Bible study guide for Esther. It says, "Getting the most out of Esther. Just do it has become a successful and popular slogan for the athletic company Nike. It refers to getting in shape and participating no matter what the physical or mental strain. But the slogan brings something else to mind. After spending time in the book of Esther, it reminds me to just do it, do the right thing no matter what the consequences. In the book of Esther, we see the lives of several characters played out. There are those people who are selfish and prideful, seeking only personal recognition, and there are those who risk everything for others and choose integrity in the face of great opposition. Esther is a book about developing godly character. In the midst of a culture that does not emphasize doing what is right, this book speaks to us in profound ways. As we read through the events of Esther, we are given a description of what godly character is and what it is not. But there is another very strong theme that weaves in and around the theme of character. God is working in the circumstances and events of people's lives to bring about his plans. God is the director, the conductor, the weaver. As God works in our lives, we must choose what is right so that we can be a part of God's plan. The events of this powerful book take place in Persia during the reign of King Xerxes from 486 to 465 BC. It has been over 100 years since the beginning of the exile, and some Jews have returned to Jerusalem. The story is set in the city of Susa, which is where the king has his winter palace. It involves the whole of the Jewish people, but revolves around the lives of King Xerxes, Esther, and her uncle Mordecai, and Haman, the king's highest noble. Esther's story presents the last major threat to the Jewish people in the Old Testament period. The threat and the Jews' deliverance are recorded in this book. The Jewish festival of Purim, which is still celebrated today, is established in Esther, which accounts for the book's great popularity among Jewish people. It is a wonderful story of God's providence and the character of his people told with humor, irony, repetition, and contrast. The book of Esther certainly proclaims faith in God's protection of his people. Esther will stir us to examine our character, the deep aspects of our hearts. It will encourage us in taking a stand for what is right and gives us the courage that God is still in control. It is a book that we need to study so that we can glorify God with our whole being and begin to be witnesses in our world because of our integrity. If we allow the themes of Esther to penetrate our lives, we will begin to stop and question our actions and thoughts and align them with God's desire. May your study in Esther produce in you a longing for consistent godly character. Now I'm going to read a little section from my own personal Bible for another introduction. And it starts out as this. Drama, power, romance, intrigue, this is the stuff of which best-selling novels are made. But far from a modern piece of fiction, those words describe a true story, lived and written centuries ago. More than entertaining reading, it is a story of the profound interplay of God's sovereignty and human will. God prepared the place and the opportunity, and his people, Esther and Mordecai, chose to act. The book of Esther begins with Queen Vashti refusing to obey an order from her husband, King Xerxes. She was subsequently banished, and the search began for a new queen. The king sent out a decree to gather together all the beautiful young women in the empire and bring them into his royal harem. Esther, a young Jewish woman, was one of those chosen. King Xerxes was so pleased with Esther that he made her his queen. Meanwhile, Mordecai, Esther's older cousin, became a government official and during his tenure foiled an assassination plot. But the ambitious and self-serving Haman was appointed second in command in the empire. When Mordecai refused to bow in reverence to him, Haman became furious and determined to destroy Mordecai and all the Jews along with him. To accomplish his vengeful deed, Haman deceived the king and persuaded him to issue an edict condemning the Jews to death. Mordecai told Queen Esther about this edict, and she decided to risk her life to save her people. Esther asked King Xerxes and Haman to be her guests at a banquet. During the feast, the king asked Esther what she really wanted, and he promised to give her anything. Esther simply invited both men to another banquet the next day. That night, unable to sleep, the king was flipping through some records in the royal archives when he read of the assassination plot that Mordecai had thwarted. Surprised to learn that Mordecai had never been rewarded for his deed, the king asked Haman what should be done to properly thank a hero. Haman thought the king must be talking about him, so he described a lavish reward. The king agreed, but to Haman's shock and utter humiliation, he learned that Mordecai was the person to be so honored. During the second banquet, the king again asked Esther what she desired. She replied that someone had plotted to destroy her and her people, and she named Haman as the culprit. Immediately, the king sentenced Haman to die on the impaling pole that he had set up for Mordecai. In the final act of this true-life drama, Mordecai was appointed to Haman's position, and the Jews were guaranteed protection throughout the land. To celebrate this historic occasion, the festival of Purim was established. Because of Queen Esther's courageous act, a whole nation was saved. Seeing her God-given opportunity, she seized it. Her life made a difference. Read Esther and watch for God at work in your life. Perhaps He has prepared you to act in such a time as this. And the key verse in Esther is, if you keep quiet at a time like this, the deliverance and relief for the Jews will arise from some other place. But if you and your relatives will die, who knows if perhaps you were made queen just such as a time as this. And then we have this little reading from the first part of our study, which I am going to include in this, and it says, a little respect is study 1 of Esther chapter 1. This is from the author of the Bible study book. One of my favorite and most influential teachers was a high school English teacher. His class was extremely difficult and challenging, but I loved it and worked diligently in order to do well. The reason I respected this teacher so much is that he listened to me and valued me. We would all like to be respected by others, so we try many ways of gaining that respect. Some try to gain it through controlling others or by demanding it. However, one of the ways respect is gained is by appreciating others and showing them the respect. Now, the group discussion that we will open up with on our study is, think of one person you respect. Describe some characteristics of this person and what he or she did to gain your respect. Then we'll go into the personal reflection. What are some of the characteristics in your life for which your friends might respect you or disrespect you?